Hello, my name is Martin, and today I will be giving you a tutorial of my military collection. I consider this a Warsaw Pact collection since it mostly makes up of Soviet memorabilia along with Warsaw Pact memorabilia from the Warsaw Pact, which existed from 1945 to 1990 along with the Soviet Union, which collapsed in 1991, 1 year following the breakup of the Warsaw Pact. In this video I will be giving you history on the medals, belts, ribbons, helmets, Ushanka's visor, caps, and other assortments which are in this collection. We hope that you enjoy this video. Here we have one part of my military collection. We have an East German medal for courage, a medal for celebrating commemorating the building of the Berlin Wall, along with a ribbon which was worn on everyday dress, a badge awarded to graduates of East German Military College. We have part of a Soviet medal for 100 years since the birth of Vladimir Lenin. We have a medal celebrating 30 years since 1918. We have part of a labor medal from 1974. Over here we have a pin, or I guess you could say a badge, for the design of the MiG-31. Over here we have a Soviet badge awarded to military members, along with a commemoration medal celebrating 50 years of a historic date in the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, since I cannot read or speak Russian, I am unable to identify the purpose of this badge. Over here we have a medal, or a plaque, issued most likely to Communist Party members. So this one is celebrating 50 years since the revolution. Here we have a plaque with a little case. As you can see, this is celebrating 60 years since the 1917 revolution, in which the Soviet Union was established. As you can see in the portrait, we have Vladimir Lenin along with the Soviet people representing the workforce of Soviet labor and agriculture in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. This is a Soviet camera from Soviet era times. This was actually bought by my father in a market in Azerbaijan. As you can clearly see, it's old and is obviously out of use. This Soviet camera, it has a name on it which I cannot read or identify. As you can see at the camera part right here. It's, for Soviet times, this is a very modern era camera, and for the quality I am quite surprised. Now we will be going on to most of my medals and badges in my collection. As you can see over here we have a medal celebrating 100 years since the birth of General Zhukov, a medal from 1944 to 2004 celebrating, my best guess is, the end of the Siege of Leningrad, a medal celebrating 1945 to 2010, so basically the Great Patriotic War. Don't be surprised if a lot of these medals are celebrating the Great Patriotic War, since they are. Here we have a medal commemorating 1,500 years since the founding of Kiev. This is the Ukrainian version of the Medal of Courage, a Soviet medal from celebrating 40 years since the revolution, or the founding of the Soviet military. This is a medal from 1974, a labor medal issued to people who were retiring from the labor force of the Soviet Union. This medal is celebrating 60 years since the creation of the Soviet military. This is a Great Patriotic War medal from 1945, celebrating 1975. This is actually what I like to call a mixed medal. Basically what this is you have the ribbon, which is from the 1988 medal of celebrating 70 years since the creation of the Soviet military. And over here we have a medal celebrating 10 years of being in the Soviet military. Over here we have a civilian award, or medal, which was given to civilian members who were fighting Nazi Germany. This is from 1945. Over here we have a medal given to members of the Soviet military. This is from 1945. Both of these medals were issued following the end of the Great Patriotic War, excuse me. Over here we have a medal celebrating this is the 30 years since the creation of the Soviet military. And this one, which is interesting between these three, is because this was created during the Stalin era, so of course he wanted his picture or portrait on the medals. Over here we have a Soviet badge for military army in the excellence in the Soviet army. Over here we have a Soviet badge for excellence in the Soviet Air Force. Over here we have a Guards badge, and this was issued to members of the Soviet army, and this was as well given or awarded to members of the Soviet Air Force. Moving over to the rest of the medals, we have the medals commemorating 10 years in the Soviet military, 15 years in the military, and 20 years in the Soviet military. Later, in I believe the 1970s, the medal for 25 years in the Soviet military was created. Over here we have a Soviet labor medal, which I already went over. This entire row is celebrating the Great Patriotic War, so 1965, 1975, and 1985. After the fall of the Soviet Union, they still continued to celebrate it, so 1995 as well as 2005. Over here we have a Soviet medal celebrating 50 years since the creation of the Soviet military, along with 60 years of the Soviet military and 7 years of the Soviet military. Over here we have two very old screw-on badges, and the reason why I know that they're old is because before the Second World War and during the Second World War and maybe into the 1950s, before modernization by Leonid Brezhnev, Soviet badges and medals would be screw-on. And so these two are awarded to, my best guess is track stars in the Soviet Army or Air Force or military. Over here we have a Soviet badge awarded to veterans of the Great Patriotic War celebrating 25 years, along with the medal for 100 years since the birth of Vladimir Lenin. This is my only Soviet camouflage. This is an example of the Soviet camo called Flora. As you can see, it's a combat hat. It's very similar to the Ushanka in terms of design. If you put these two flaps down, they come down, so it gives more protection against wind and weather. As you can see, a little hammer and sickle, and it's pretty good condition for its quality. Over here we have a Soviet Air Force cap, officers, as you can see by it's very decorated. This is a dress camp, and you would have seen this during Soviet military parades in the Kremlin, as well as the Red Square during anniversary days and celebrations. Here we have an East German enlistment cap. This was issued to members of the East German Army. We have Soviet Ushanka issued to enlistment men. This is a Soviet naval Ushanka issued to Soviet officers, as you can see by the emblem. So over here we have the Soviet SS H-68 helmet, the East German M56, the Czech M54, as well as the Hungarian M65. Over here you have the Soviet Army belt, an East German field belt, Soviet naval belt issued to sailors, naval officers, as well as Soviet naval infantrymen, and over here we have an East German Army belt. In order to give you an example of what the Ushankas over here can do in terms of flaps along with this combat camouflage hat, as you can see the flaps come over, but when it's cold, let's say, these come down over here, and then they come all the way down to form this angle right here in order to protect the person who is wearing the Ushanka. As you can see, this is very popular with the Soviet military, and as far as I'm concerned, it continues to see service in the modern Russian army, as well as other combat units in the world.